Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Oh,
Today we're diving into a topic that's close to my heart, maps and time. We're taking a closer look at Chapter 1 of Exploring Society, India and Beyond, which some of you suggested, and it's a fascinating stuff.
yeah, this chapter really brings to light how crucial maps and time are, for understanding our place in the world.
It's like, have you ever thought about how amazing it is that we can pinpoint a location on the other side of the planet?
It's mind-blowing when you actually stop and think about it.
Totally. The chapter opens with this great analogy comparing a map to a treasure map. And it's so true, right? Like, a map can reveal all these hidden connections and lead you to incredible discoveries.
Absolutely. It's not just about finding your way. It's about understanding the vastness and interconnectedness of our world. Right. And speaking of discoveries, this chapter unearths something really cool, the Ujjaini meridian. Did you know that centuries before Greenwich became the global standard, India had its own prime meridian?
It's amazing, isn't it? It really challenges the traditional, Eurocentric narrative of history.
They're real. It makes you realize how much history we might be missing just because we haven't looked at it from different perspectives.
And that's why I think this chapter is so important. It encourages us to question our assumptions and explore those alternative narratives.
I'm with you there. It's like we often take for granted that maps and coordinates are these universal, objective tools.
But they're not. They're shaped by human perspectives, by history, by culture. The Ujjaini meridian is a perfect example of that.
It shows us that different cultures develop their own unique ways of understanding and representing the world.
And that's something to celebrate. It enriches our understanding of both the past and the present.
It's all about recognizing that there are multiple ways of seeing and navigating the world, and this chapter really brings that home.
It reminds us that maps aren't just about finding our way, but also about understanding the stories and perspectives embedded in every location.
Speaking of navigating, let's talk about latitude and longitude. They're like the fundamental building blocks of our global positioning system, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Latitude and longitude give us a framework for pinpointing any location on Earth with incredible accuracy.
And what I love is how the chapter uses those relatable examples to explain it, like comparing latitude and longitude to a grid system, like on a chessboard.
It makes it so much easier to visualize. Imagine trying to describe the exact position of a chess piece without using the grid coordinates.
It'd be nearly impossible. But with latitude and longitude, we have this elegant system for communicating location with pinpoint accuracy.
And it's amazing how those seemingly simple lines of latitude and longitude impact our lives in such profound ways.
They're not just lines on a map. They influence everything from climate patterns to time zones, even the way we perceive distance and direction.
It's true. Just think about how latitude affects climate. The closer you are to the equator, the warmer the temperatures generally are.
It's incredible how this one concept helps explain why we have such diverse climates and ecosystems across the planet, from lush rainforests to icy polar regions.
It's a great example of how geography shapes our world and the incredible diversity of life on Earth.
And then there's longitude, which ties directly into our next topic, time zones, which I'm super curious about.
Oh, time zones. Now that's where things get really interesting. And a bit mind-bending, if you ask me.
It really is incredible how this one planet spinning through space creates all these different time zones,
It's wild, right? Like, right now, someone halfway across the world could be waking up to a brand new day.
While we're getting ready for bed, it's like the chapter says, the Earth's rotation literally shapes our experience of time.
And it highlights how interconnected we all are, even when we're separated by thousands of miles.
Absolutely. And speaking of different perspectives, I loved how the chapter didn't just focus on one type of map. We've got physical maps showing us mountains and rivers, but then there are political maps too.
Right. Political maps are all about those human-made boundaries, countries, states, all that.
It's like looking at a snapshot of global power dynamics and how we've carved up the world.
Exactly. And then there are thematic maps, which I think are super cool. They can show us so much.
Oh yeah, those are like specialized lenses, right? Like the chapter talked about using them to show population density.
Or climate change, natural resources, anything you can think of. They reveal patterns we might not see otherwise.
They're like visual stories, and they help us understand complex information in a really powerful way.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And thinking about these different map types, it reminds me of that Ujjaini meridian again.
Oh, right, because it shows us that maps can be cultural artifacts too, not just these neutral tools.
Exactly. We're so used to thinking about maps and the prime meridian from a, Western perspective.
With Greenwich as the be-all and end-all.
But the UJ Meridian reminds us that other cultures developed sophisticated systems long before Greenwich.
It's like, who gets to decide what's considered standard or universal anyway?
That's the question, isn't it? And it makes you wonder what other amazing discoveries we might be overlooking.
If we don't challenge those assumptions, like you were saying earlier.
Exactly. And speaking of challenging assumptions, let's loop back to those time zones for a sec.
Okay, yeah, because it's not as simple as just drawing straight lines on a map and calling it a day.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Time zones have to take into account political boundaries, and that can get messy.
Tell me about it. The chapter mentioned that countries like the United States, Russia, they have multiple time zones.
Imagine traveling across Russia, right? You could be changing your watch every few hours.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
It's like time travel, but in slow motion. And it shows how, we try to impose order on something as fluid as time.
We do, don't we? And speaking of imposing order, did you catch that part about the international date line?
Oh, yeah. That's where things get really trippy. Crossing that line is like stepping into another dimension, almost.
It really is. You're traveling through space, but you're also jumping forward or backward in time.
The chapter explained how going east across the line means subtracting a day, and going west means adding a day.
It messes with your mind a bit, but
Yeah.
It's crucial for keeping global travel and communication running smoothly.
It's like we need those imaginary lines, as strange as they are, to make sense of our world on a global scale.
We do. It's a great example of how these geographical concepts we're discussing, they're not just abstract ideas.
They have real-world implications, whether it's scheduling that international flight or just understanding different time zones.
It's all connected. And it highlights how important it is to be geographically literate in today's world.
For sure. It's not just about knowing your capitals anymore. It's about understanding these bigger forces that shape our lives.
Exactly. And I think this chapter does a fantastic job of laying the groundwork for that understanding.
You know, it's amazing how we can unpack so much from just one chapter of exploring society.
Right. Just goes to show you how fundamental these concepts are, maps, time, location.
They're like the hidden framework behind so much of how we understand the world.
Exactly. And this chapter, it doesn't just tell us about these concepts, it makes us think about them differently.
Totally. Like that quote from the Indian astronomer, what was his name again?
Aryabhaya.
Yeah, Aryabhaya. He talked about how the Earth is a globe surrounded by all creatures, and it just clicks,
It's a beautiful way of putting it. It reminds us that we're all part of this one planet, all sharing the same space.
And that's something we often forget, I think, caught up in our own little corners of the world.
We do. But that's where maps come in, right? They help us zoom out and see the bigger picture.
They do. And not just see it, but understand it, navigate it.
Exactly. And as our world becomes more and more interconnected, that understanding becomes even more crucial.
It's true. It's not just about finding your way anymore. It's about understanding global issues, cultural differences, all of it.
Absolutely. Like, take climate change, for example. You can't really grasp the scale of it without understanding maps, time zones, the whole shebang.
It's like we need those tools to even begin to wrap our heads around these complex problems, let alone solve them.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so glad we took this deep dive. It's given us, and hopefully our listeners, a lot to think about.
For sure. And it all started with this simple idea of locating places on Earth. Who knew it could lead us so far?
That's the beauty of knowledge, isn't it? You never know where it'll take you.
You got that right. Well, on that note, I think we've covered some serious ground today.
We have. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise. And a huge thank you to everyone listening in. We hope you found this deep dive as illuminating as we did. Don't forget to check out the show notes for more resources on maps, time zones, and everything we've talked about today. Until next time, keep exploring.
Like, comment, and subscribe.